This is Kyle Hunter and Elijah Fleming with Don't Mean Nothin. We're here with Mike Ergo. Mike's a Marine Corps veteran, and pleasure to have you here. I appreciate you coming on with us. Looking forward to talking to you a little bit today.
Yeah, I'm stoked to be here, man. This is fun.
Awesome. So let's start with early life. Where'd you grow up? How was your family life, parents, all that good stuff?
Sure. Yeah, I was born in Salt Lake City, Utah, and since my family wasn't LDS or Mormon, we moved back to California. And so I grew up in the East Bay of San Francisco, in a town called Walnut Creek. And Walnut Creek's pretty much like a Leave It to Beaver town. It's just pretty easygoing, not very much crime. You know, I lived right on the edge of the open space, so I spent a lot of weekends just catching frogs in creeks, you know, playing baseball, and, you know, exploring the hills around, you know, the foothills of California here.
Having a true childhood.
Yeah, I was pretty lucky. I also had my grandparents moved literally across the creek from me in my backyard, so I could go over there and spend a lot of time with them. You know, they got me into things like music and science and all kinds of after-school things that I probably wouldn't have gotten into otherwise.
Wow, that's really cool. What were they like?
My grandma is 88 and she still lifts weights and ride horses, so she's certified badass.
Yeah.
My grandfather he's still alive too. He's about to turn 91, and he from Chicago, Swedish English immigrant family that came and started a bakery in Southside Chicago, and he's an attorney. And just he would take me everywhere. So we did a lot of one of the greatest times I had with him is I actually brought a picture of it. Him and my uncle and I went around to probably 10 or 15 different baseball stadiums, starting and ending in New York, and went through the Midwest and you know, saw all kinds of games, ate a lot of hot dogs, you know, just shared some good time together.
Yeah, it's a blast. I did a similar thing with my dad. We just extended out over like 20 years, you know, but we've tried to go to every ballpark, and it's just been, it's a lot of fun. You know, it's just like pure enjoyment, you know. And I think the only ones we're missing are some of like the southern states, but definitely feel that. That's awesome. So you said they got you into music. What are you still playing instruments today?
I have a saxophone out, and I played saxophone growing up. I played saxophone and piano, and I was involved in like every school band there was, from symphonic band, jazz band, marching band, pep band. And I was into that. So I kind of detoured away from playing sports into just focusing on music, and, you know, eventually even joined the Marine Corps to be in the band, recruited that way. So yeah, I was really into music.
So before we get into that, do you have one story that sticks out to you from your childhood that's just something that you always go back to, or you remember specifically?
You know, I spent a lot of time playing baseball, you know, with my dad, and I'd have to say though the best times I had, I might not be able to think of anything specific, but the best times I had were out in the creek or the hills, either by myself or with a friend, with just not much going on, just like totally absorbing the scene, you know, whether it was the sound of the water or the wind in the hills, and just being totally present there, like using all my senses from what I could see, smell, hear, even taste sometimes, and being fully immersed in that. And I think those times and that silence and that connection to just the environment I'm in is something that's really sustained me as a kid.
Did you have that level of awareness back then that you were totally present?
No, I didn't have the level of awareness I do today, or the vocabulary to describe it.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it was just outside quiet time, maybe was how my kid mind would describe it.
Yeah. It's just, I find it interesting because now it's like, with technology and everything else, it's like most of what we're doing in terms of, at least for me, like meditating and everything else, is like trying to get back to the ability to just be present in the moment doing something, right? Where it's always in the back of your mind, you're thinking of what's next or what you have to do, and it's really hard to slow down. So I find that interesting because it's just the childhood experience of just not having constant things to look at, I think was great, you know?
Yeah, I feel really fortunate that, you know, I'm 41 now, so I grew up, you know, late 80s, early 90s, or through the 90s, and pre-internet, really, and pre-cell phone, pre-smartphone. So it was pretty common to just do things for the sake of doing them, and just being able to still navigate those things when I need them now, but have the memories, core memories of doing things without posting it on Instagram.
Can you imagine, like, now being 8 years old and having a tablet in front of you all the time? Like, I can't tell you how many people I see where their kid starts to act up, and they're, you know, 2-3-year-old kid, and they're just, here's a phone, here's something to play with, and it's like, man, it's so young, it gets like embedded in your brain.
Yeah.
Like, you know, I remember my parents wouldn't even let me have a cell phone until I was like 15, you know, and back then I was all mad, but now I'm like, shit, I'm glad that I had the opportunity to live without one. You know?
Fully agree.
Yeah. So you got into the Marines because you wanted to join the band originally?
Correct. We had a recruiter come to my band class in high school, and they brought a new Marine around who had joined through the it was like music enlistment option, whatever the acronym they call it. But you know, she was going to be in the band, and so I had no idea that you could play music and be in the military. And at the time, that sounded really appealing. So I signed up to do that. So service was a big thing for me. I guess, you know, you asked about core memories growing up. One of my favorite things to do growing up was during the summers and spring breaks, I'd go with a church group, and we'd go down to either South America or Mexico, and then one summer we went to Slovakia and help, you know, build houses or build the churches and, you know, do physical labor. So I got to experience other cultures and, you know, learn about people and just see them and talk with them and spend time. I think that's what I enjoyed the most growing up.
Yeah.
Out of everything.
Helps you appreciate a lot, right?
Oh yeah. And so the idea of serving other people, it felt good to do that. And, you know, I was not academically focused, pretty intelligent growing up, but I just didn't have the drive to pursue higher education at the time. I burned out in high school in terms of drive to produce, you know, good grades or anything. So serving the country sounded really cool.
So was there anything specific about the Marines that stuck out? Like, was it the uniform or the presentation, or?
When I went to join, I think about that a lot, because there was no consideration for other branches. It was only the Marine Corps, and maybe I grew up, so my grandfather knew a lot of Marines. He never served, but he worked with a lot of people who were, you know, fought battles in Iwo Jima, were there in the Chosin Reservoir in Korea, and would tell him a little bit about it, you know, probably the sanitized versions of things. And so I just had I think a sense of awe about the Marines, especially in the Pacific campaign of World War II. And also, yeah, the uniform, definitely the coolest, I think.
Weren't you the era too where they had the commercial of like the Marine slaying the dragon? Was that?
Yeah, I remember the Marine slaying the fire dragon. I'm like, I'm ready.
Yeah.
I'm ready. And you instantly transform into a guy with dress blues and a sword.
That's awesome. So you did you go to the recruiting office and tell them, you know, what you were interested in, or did they try to sway you either direction? Or like when you decided to join, I'd imagine when you went to the recruiting office and said, hey, I want to join for music, you know, were they trying to say, hey, let's go this direction instead, or?
Yeah, when I showed up, well, yeah, they wanted me to go music. You know, it was harder to get those enlistments. They could get guys to go infantry or certain kind of jobs, you know, but it was probably harder to get someone to be a musician and go in the Marine Corps.
Yeah.
Very specific personality to do that. So, but when I showed up to the recruiting office, I looked a lot different. So I had this big orange fro. It was out of control and a little beard. And so I show up there and they were like, boy, what are you doing? Are you high? 7-Eleven's right over there. And I was like, no, I want to join the Marine Corps. And they're like, stop. I said, no, I'm serious, guys. I want to join the Marine Corps. And the one staff sergeant recruiter was he was like at a certain point like crying, laughing. He's like, I can't do this anymore, man. Did the fucking Bob over the Navy office put you up to this? I'm gonna get that fucker. This is good. This is good. So nobody took me serious when I wanted to join the Marines. So I was like, fuck this, and I left, and I came back another day. They're like, are you serious? You actually want to join the Marine Corps? Yes, I do. And so I had to pass an audition playing my saxophone. They had a special musical recruiter who was a Marine who came and made sure you're good enough to be in.
Really? I didn't know any of that whole process. So they actually had a separate meeting with you to do that entirely. Like they brought somebody in specifically for making sure that you could play.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah, because they want people who are pretty decent to be part of it, and so I have to pass that, and so so I ended up doing the delayed entry program. So you sign up and then you leave when you're done with high school. So I signed up in May 11th of 2001, pre 9/11 world, and I was all set to go play my saxophone and be in the marching band for the Marine Corps and do all that. And I didn't go right away to boot camp because I didn't graduate high school. So I'd do summer school, with the cool kids who were too cool to do their schoolwork. So did that, and I was, my parents, when I finally graduated, they're like, good, you graduated, we're gonna send you on a little trip because we're proud of you. So I was actually in England when 9/11 happened.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was with this Australian tour guide and group, and they're like, guys, we have to stop the tour of this castle we're in because, the Twin Towers in New York have just been hit with planes and they've collapsed. I'm like, man, these Aussies have a kind of fucked up sense of humor. I thought they're just, and then it sunk in eventually that this was real.
Yeah.
I'm like, huh. So that was my first ping kind of my conscience of like, I didn't feel my calling at that point was to be in the music world. Well, maybe other people would be sent overseas. It just felt like this was the start of something. I didn't know what.
Right. What's interesting to me before we get too far into the 9/11 stuff is you said that you were held back and had to go through summer school for school to graduate, right?
Yeah.
And even through that, your parents were still proud of you after the fact and got you on that trip. So are you saying that, that support from them sounds like it would be crucial, going forward? Because like, I feel like if I failed out of a class or something, my mom was not happy.
Yeah, my parents, I think, were relieved, I think, that I finally passed summer school. Because I did so well in school, and then senior year just like took a nosedive with the GPA. And I didn't even do anything cool senior year. I didn't like ditch class. I just went and showed up, and they're like, Mike, you need to participate today? And then just put my head down on the desk. I'm like, okay. So I showed up and did nothing, like an asshole.
So is that like a goal of yours? Did your parents tell you like, hey, if you get through summer school, we're going to send you to England?
I don't remember how that came up eventually. I do remember though, before that, before my last semester of senior year, I had gotten accepted to a college in Germany. I was actually going to go to school in Southwest Germany and had an academic scholarship and everything. So my parents are really excited about that. We're like, oh wow, this can be this international kid, and go learn, get fluent in another language, learn another culture, go to college. This sounds cool. And then when I showed up, and I said, oh, by the way, I just joined the Marine Corps today. Like, you see my look in my parents' face of just like, my mom was terrified because her dad was in the Navy and came back with some alcoholism, and that was her impression of the military. It was like, military equals alcoholism, which means you move around a lot, and it's tough to get by. And my dad was just crushed that I wasn't going to do this cool, international, abroad experience. So they tried to talk me out of it, and I just said, no, I'm going to do this. So it was a shock to them.
Yeah.
It was a shock to them. So I think to make peace with it and to encourage me, they were able to send me on this trip.
Very cool. I almost think that, because when I was that age, I would have never thought of, traveling abroad or anything like that. I've still never been to Europe. And I think that I wonder if the mission work that you did early on kind of opened your eyes to a lot of that travel, and made it like more of a possibility, you know, because a lot of kids here in the U.S. don't really think about being able to, how many cool things they could go do outside of the country.
Right. Yeah. I mean, my eyes were open to these other cultures, like just looking at a map, and then going from saying that, yeah, that is a different place in the world, to going there and talking to the people and drinking yerba mate with them on the streets in Asuncion, Paraguay, or, you know, going to one of those fogo de chão, like Brazilian steakhouses, you know, like at the source, and meeting the people. I'm like, oh, these are people. These are like very similar to me, just, you know, maybe they like soccer and I like baseball.
Yeah, right. So 9/11 happens, you're in Europe. What was the response like right away? Were they high alert, police everywhere kind of presence, or were they worried about the same thing happening there?
Everyone was on edge everywhere. And what I remember first was, I think it was maybe a week later or a few days later, it might have been an international moment of silence they had, because I was in the city of Edinburgh, Scotland, and they shut down the buses and everything that were on, and everything. They had a few moments of silence, and everyone was very attuned, I think was the best way I could put it, to what had just happened. And then when I flew back, yeah, there's like full on, you know, military in the airports, you know, like there's nobody on my flight on the way back.
Wow.
I was on this like 737, you know, like I think it's whatever it was, where you get like 5 or 6, you know, seats in the middle row. And it was like me and like a few other people on this plane. Eerie.
Yeah.
Very eerie. And it started just ramping up, like, you know, something like it was building. The energy was building to something. I was like, wow, I'm not just going to play my sax. Well, I'm not just going for a peacetime enlistment. Like something might happen.
Right.
I wasn't sure what.
So you made the decision right away to switch over to infantry?
I made this decision slowly. I wasn't brave enough to just stand up and say, hey, I want to go to infantry now. You know, I went through boot camp and everything first, and I didn't make that decision until I got to the band school to switch over.
Give us your best boot camp stories.
Yeah, so first impressions of boot camp were pretty gnarly. I showed up and like I had gained weight during the summer. So I was like a few pounds below, you know, like going to like the mandatory like fat platoon. And so I show up and like they shave your head, they put you in, you know, different clothes and fatigues and stuff. And like I remember, so I'm in boot camp in San Diego, and I catch a glimpse of myself in the reflection of the window there. It's like sometime in the middle of the night. And I see this like pale, fat, you know, just like you know, not very confident looking person looking back at me. I'm like, shit, they got a long ways to go to make this into like Marine Corps material. I'm just like, this is a rough start for sure. And, you know, I think, yeah, I whipped my ass into shape for sure, doing all the work. You know, what stands out to me at boot camp though, besides, you know, just really hard physical training and work and the high pressure and doing everything really fast and failing at everything, you know, by design, was just how many funny things our drill instructors would say or do, and having to maintain bearing and not like break into smiles or laugh. Like the best was on Sundays, they'd have something called core values. And so your senior drill instructor would sit down, take off his, you know, Smoking the Bear campaign cover and like talk to you kind of like man to man as a group. And he's talking about whatever, I don't remember. And he's this big African-American, you know, imposing guy, and that you did not want to mess with. And we're sitting there and there's a moment of silence, and you hear one of the guys, the recruits by me, just let out a little squeaker fart, just and he just looked at him like, are you serious? Are you fucking serious? And he's like, you just fucking fart while I'm talking? And he's like, yes, sir. And he goes, suck it up. And so he puffs up, like suck it up. So he's like puffing up and posturing. He's like, no, suck it up. And so he does that again. He's like, no, boy, I said, suck it up. Eat that fucking fart. And so he's there, going like this. He's like, I don't hear you. And so I'm watching this kid next to me go, like eating this fart. And he's like, keep eating. I fucking smell it still. And I'm sitting there like curling my toes. I'm pinching my things, just going, try not to laugh. Because he's like the funniest shit I've seen in such a long time. And I can't even laugh at it. And like I had tears coming down from laughing, but I was like so scared of this guy at the same time that I didn't want to break tact and bearing. So shit like that would happen.
That's awesome.
Oh, it was great.
So I think it's interesting too that you had to go through the same boot camp everybody else did, right? Like there was no difference from somebody that's going to the band from somebody that's going to
same boot camp.
Yeah.
And I was a motivator. I do all the stuff, and they're like, "How are you in the band? Why aren't you going to infantry? Like, it didn't fit." So those seeds were planted too, But yeah, it's regular 13 weeks of boot camp, just like anybody else.
How'd you feel getting that Eagle Globe and Anchor?
I getting the Eagle Globe and Anchor and finally getting some positive feedback, and realizing that this dream, this pipe dream of becoming a Marine from what I was, just some soft civilian from upper middle class family in Northern California, I could become a Marine, was the most gratifying thing I've ever earned. And it takes the cake for sure. Even it made graduating college anticlimactic. It's the most proud I've ever been, for accomplishing something of my own merit.
Yeah, that's awesome. And that's something that you still think about today as far as going back and if I feel like that's such a difficult tribulation that you have to go through for so long, and then knowing that you were able to accomplish that from what you saw in the mirror, I think it's got to be a driving force even now.
There's so many things once you do something like that I would think, okay, that was once on the impossible side of things in my mind, and then I did it, and then it unlocks all these ideas like, what else could I accomplish that seemed impossible? And so it really puts things in perspective. What can I accomplish? So it breaks down limitations.
And then you went from there to your band training, or is there training for that specifically? Before
the band school, or what my friends affectionately call Marine Corps band camp, like I'd go, so everybody who's not infantry goes to a makeshift infantry training that's a few weeks long. So I did that for a few weeks in Camp Pendleton, California, and then I got sent over to Virginia Beach, and where the School of Music is. It's where the Navy, Marine Corps, and Army, the Air Force has their own. Beautiful setting, and Little Creek, Virginia, really nice small naval base. And so I picked up my saxophone again after weeks of just not doing anything musical, and I just didn't have the joy. I play my music, but I just the gravity of 9/11 had just happened a few months before. This is February of 2002 now. Being in band school, I didn't feel right about it. So eventually I just I was like, okay, I stopped trying, really. I do everything else. I do the inspections, the uniform, I do the PT, I march and everything, but I just feel like practicing my saxophone, and so I got put on probation for not passing one of my musical tests. And then to stay in the School of Music, you have to go before the commanders of the school, for all the three branches there, and basically ask to let them, show you some mercy and stay in the school. And then I just said, I actually, gentlemen, I would like to transfer to the infantry. And they looked at me like a dick was growing out of my forehead. They're like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, okay, easy, yeah, so. They're just like, yeah, not a problem.
Right. Wow. So was there like an element of guilt too, that just knowing like some of those guys that you were training with were going to be probably deploying and going through all that.
Huge element of guilt, knowing that other people would be sent over and I might not. And it was an interesting perspective because on one hand, I didn't feel resentment towards other people who wanted to stay in music. I just said, yeah, for you, but not for me.
Right.
You know, I felt more at home in the mud, you know, in the trenches and doing that. Yeah, and so, yeah, they sent me on a Greyhound bus from Virginia down to North Carolina to go through the full infantry school, you know, so, and then get stationed wherever I was going to get stationed.
So I was actually going to ask you that. So, so they had you restart that whole AIT process, like the infantry training process?
Yeah, so as opposed to 3 week long, it was a couple months long and really delved deep, and they split us up into, you could choose to be a rifleman, which I chose, or a machine gunner or a mortarman, you know, and some of the other classes you could choose, you know, like being a tow gunner or an assaultman.
So do the West Coast Marines have the same training facility as the North Carolina facility, or were you put in with an East Coast group after that?
Yeah, there's one on each coast. There's an infantry school on each coast. So I was doing the East Coast one there in North Carolina, you know, with all the people who had just gotten out of boot camp at Parris Island. And so I was just this weird anomaly of someone like, so you're an E3, you're a Lance Corporal, and you were in the band, but now you're here with us who just graduated boot camp. So, yeah.
And you're from Pendleton.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm from California, so like I have no context. Like I showed up in North Carolina, like I'm used to orienting myself towards the mountains. Like I didn't realize that until I got to North Carolina, which is on the coast, is just flat. Mm-hmm. Water tower is like the tallest thing around. And so I'm seeing like NASCAR advertisements and fucking people walking around in like, you know, hunting gear, and like it's southern as shit, you know, like going to a Waffle House for the first time. I'm like, where the fuck am I, you know? People, I remember like being asked, you know, and, during training, like, oh, you're from California? You probably like that piece of shit Jeff Gordon, huh? And I'm like, I didn't even know who the fuck Jeff Gordon was. I didn't know anything about NASCAR. I was like, oh shit, is he on the Raiders? You know, like, I'm like, man, I'm just out of my depth here.
That's great. So what I find interesting too is that, so that's before the actual invasion of Iraq. So did you have anybody that was in your AIT trainers or group that had combat experience, maybe from the Gulf War or from anything prior, or were you mostly all fresh?
Mostly fresh. You know, the interesting thing about the Marine Corps is that, you know, infantry units will deploy and combat arms units will deploy every year and a half on a group of ships. And so there's a group of ships in the Pacific and a group of ships in the Atlantic or the Indian or the Mediterranean, just to be around so they can respond within like 48 hours to any kind of. So we had some of our instructors had been like in like, I remember one guy was a sniper in East Timor, and like when shit was popping off there, so they would send a group of Marines in to help pacify the situation, but nothing large scale. Mm-hmm. Yeah, older people who had been through Desert Storm, but our direct, you know, sergeant instructors were, mostly just training, no war experience.
And when you're stationed, like you're talking about on the coast, is that considered the Marine Expeditionary Unit?
That's what my first deployment was with a Marine Expeditionary Unit. I ended up getting stationed at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, so I stayed right there in North Carolina. I was fucking horrified because I was like, I didn't like it at first. Grew to love it. Grew to love that state and that locale, but it was just so foreign to me.
Yeah. What'd you do there compared to, like, I know you gravitated towards the mountains, so there had to be something else.
Well, like any good Marine, I learned how to consume vast amounts of alcohol. So that was like, brought all cultures together. But I loved going to the beach. What really tripped me out about being on the beach in the East Coast was here, we go in the water. The water is in like the 50s. If it gets warm, it's in like the low 60s. And so you go in for a few seconds, pretend you like it, and then you get cold as fuck, and then you get out. Like, oh, that's great. It's not. But so I was expecting that when I jumped in the water in Carolina, and and I was bracing for that shock, and it was just nice and warm. I'm like, wait, you can enjoy this here? So I was like, this is great. I should do this more often. So I'd spent a lot of time at the beach, when I could.
Awesome. And then when did you deploy the first time going over to the Middle East?
First time I deployed early March of 2003. And we were part of that Marine Expeditionary Unit. So we didn't join all the forces that flew over to Kuwait and invaded from the south. We were part of a group that was supposed to invade from the north through Turkey. And Turkey eventually said, no, we'd rather not have, the American Army and Marine Corps drive through our country and to invade Iraq. And so we ended up flying from Greece, a naval base in Greece, in Crete, into the city of Mosul after most of the invasion had taken place. So this is we were there in April, I want to say, April of 2003. The statue of Saddam had fallen and they'd taken Baghdad. So we showed up in Mosul, Iraq, in the airport, and the Army Special Forces guys had already taken the airport themselves. And we show up in this helicopter, we run off the back, we are war boners full alert. We're like, yeah, we got this, yeah, fuck yeah. And we get in this L-shaped ambush, and this guy drives up in his truck, and he just gets out, his hand in his pocket, and he's some dude with a Yankees hat, and he's like, you guys like the Marines that are coming in? We're like, yes. Really, really killing our war spirit. And he's like, cool, man, I got some bunks for you guys in the airport. We'll bring a truck bring you guys over. And they're just, I would do the same thing in their shoes, but they're flexing hard, man. They'd taken the airport themselves, and we were just there to babysit. And
so before you got over there, did you guys find out that you'd be deploying to Iraq?
Yeah, we sat around on the ship just waiting to go into Iraq.
What was that like mentally for you?
I wanted to go in. All the guys I knew were we're all charged. We've been training for so long, beyond just boot camp, but, from the summer 2002 all the way through the winter, just every day is training. For the infantry, you're training. You're out in the swamps, or you're flying to Southern California, or you're just always doing stuff to get ready for war. And so, finally, let's do the war thing. Let's get there. It's happening. And so we found ourselves getting frustrated that we weren't getting set in. And so we're watching people invade Iraq on the TV and the mess hall on the ship, completely demoralized. Fuck. Because our opinion at the time is the war in Afghanistan, the first part of it was over. So we assumed the war in Afghanistan was over. And then, when we deployed the first time in Iraq, we spent less than a month in country and then went back to doing training ops. It's fuck, we missed 2 wars. How is this possible? We missed 2 wars. Literally, opportunity's gone. And so we're well, I don't know, where we just make up war stories and lie about it, or we just walk around and call ourselves pieces of shit because we missed these huge wars of our generation.
Little did you know.
Yeah, exactly.
You have 20 more years.
No kidding. Nobody could have seen that coming.
Yeah. So you guys were at the airfield the whole time, the first deployment, the first month?
Yeah, in Mosul, just in the airfield. I mean, I went on a operation to secure a hospital in downtown Mosul. That was the most exciting thing I did. I didn't fire a single round.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's a dangerous city too.
Yeah, it turned out to be a real tough one. Mm-hmm. Yeah, an ISIS stronghold too later on. And then even before that, just a lot of resistance. But what I remember about the city, I mean, it was prettier up there in northern Iraq. A lot more green and mountains. But the Kurds were up there, and so the Kurds had no love for the Arabic Iraqis, and they were in the process of starting their own country anyways. And so they were just we heard gunfire everywhere, and the Kurds were just going through settling scores or whatever they were doing, but they were just we've been waiting for this for our whole lives.
Yeah. Those guys are still over there fighting.
Oh yeah, they're badass.
Yeah. So did you meet any of those guys?
I met a couple of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I could just tell you can tell when someone has that bloodlust and they're just like, yes, I'm doing everything I've like waited my whole life for. He had that feeling.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
so
something else. So, so you get done with that month, you come back home.
Well, we still had another 5 months at sea.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah,
okay.
so it's a weird thing. So we went and trained in Albania afterwards for a couple weeks after we go to a war zone. Yeah, it's cool. And I'm like trying to allow myself to have fun doing it, but it's like we're going to practice after the game that we didn't really get to play.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm like, this is what it is. Yeah.
The FOMO.
Yeah, FOMO to the max. Like, we wanted to go to war and shoot guns, and we didn't get to do it, so.
So did you go home after the training?
We did it. We hit a few ports. We went to Portugal, Spain, we went back to Greece, went to Italy. So it was, on the surface, really fun.
Yeah.
I felt guilty. I'm like, I left the band so I could do the war thing. And here I am just like visiting cities in Europe. Like, this is not what I'm trying to do.
Right. Did you get to actually like enjoy any of the scenery and stuff at those places?
Yeah, when I wasn't blacking out, from drinking too much, I got to enjoy, the scenery and the culture and, have nice meals, meet people, met some great Italian people there that, took us around and made friends for the day with people, and I love that. It was fun, but the whole time I'm feeling guilty about having fun.
Right.
So, I'm glad I had the experience. I'm glad I had the experience for sure. And then, we got home October of 2003. So I think we're out at sea for like 6.5 months, and got back and just kind of like a what now kind of thing.
Were your parents relieved that you were at sea more often than you were in Iraq?
Yeah, my parents were just really happy, and I couldn't appreciate that at the time. Now that I have kids, I can appreciate that feeling of like, oh my God, like my child is in a war. They have no control over what happens. They just see the news, and the news is showing the most sensational things. So they have no idea if I'm just sitting, in the desert watching camels go by, or if I'm like running and gunning, or like what I'm doing. So I got back and they were relieved. They threw me a really nice welcome home party. So I showed, I was in my dress blues, feeling cool. Had a few ribbons on my uniform. And so actually when my wife and I started dating, because we knew each other growing up through middle school and high school, but I was just this goofy kind of big orange afro, class clown person. And then she sees me like with a high and tight and Marine Corps, and like I'm toned and strong. And so it was different, kind of like, oh, interesting. So I was like, this is my opportunity to make a move. So yeah, we started dating at that point, kind of long distance.
So you liked her before all that, or you like?
We were friends, and she was cute, and I liked her. And then she started sending me letters, and when she was in college up near Seattle in Tacoma, and she'd send me letters and pictures, and just like, how are you doing, as a friend. And I'm like, all right, if I get the opportunity, I'm gonna try to make a move here, because she's looking really good, and she's a friend, and I really like her. And we'll see, we'll see. But like, it was just so nice that she'd written me these letters while I'm deployed, and just kind of out in foreign lands, just kind of, because like my connection with the guys I was serving with is like, I was a junior Marine. I was the bottom of the bottom. The senior Marines didn't really like me, because they're like, again, they're all East Coast or like Southern states kind of guys, and they're like, oh yeah, you're from California, huh? You guys just walk around with flip-flops, eating sushi, sucking each other's dicks. I was like, yep, that's all we do. 100% of what we do. So no, they hate, and I had red hair, so I just fucking was. There's like, who's like, yeah, it's not racist if we just fucking hammer you. So I got hammered. I had to earn every single friendship I had. So the guys with me eventually accepted me. The younger, junior enlisted guys, but above me, I was just hated for everything they thought of California would be like. I was just the lightning rod for that. It was so hard. It was difficult. Yeah. So I was just feeling lonely because I'm like, fuck, I could go back to my, birthing room where, we're sleeping and get yelled at or get the shit beat out of me, or like go on a working party and mop things, or, and then I'm getting these letters from, who this girl who would become my girlfriend and then my fiance and my wife. I'm like, this is cool. This is like, I feel a lot better. And it was such a nice connection that I was like, well, not everybody hates me. This is nice.
Yeah. So how'd you make the move when you got back?
I could see she looked at me a little different. And so, I just asked her, just go on dates and go to dinner. And, we had a group of friends going up to Lake Tahoe, so I invited her and a couple of her friends, and I just, we'd gone out for a little bit, but I made my move. Started, just making out with her in the upstairs. I'm like, I think we're good. Yeah. Nice. So, and then, we started talking, like, are we gonna do this? Because she was in school in Seattle. I'm in the Marine Corps Infantry in North Carolina. It's like, so the closest would be a few thousand miles apart. And then I knew at a certain point I would deploy again, didn't know what that looked like. So we're like, yeah, let's do this. And, we talk all the time.
Good.
She'd come out and visit, yeah.
Yeah, that's tough on a woman too, to be that far away from you.
Especially when I deployed the second time. Yeah, it was rough, really rough.
So when was that, when did that deployment start?
We deployed again in June of 2004. Leading up to it, we were told, okay, the war's over. President Bush had done his mission accomplished, cool guy stuff on the aircraft carrier. And I'm like, all right, the war's over, so we're just there to do stability and security operations. Go around and shake people's hands. I went to a basic Arabic course, so I could say a few words of Arabic to people and see what they needed, report that to our intel people, and see if our engineers and stuff could help repair things that have been damaged during, the invasion. And so that's what we were training for. We're like, boring. Like all of us were like, all right, whatever. Hopefully something really, horrendous happens so we can get in some gunfights. That's like all we were thinking. And then April of '04, some contractors in the city of Fallujah were kidnapped, killed, beaten to death, shot, everything, and then they're burned to death, and then their bodies were hung from this bridge. And so that came out in the news, and we're like, maybe this won't be this stability and security operation kind of deployment we were thinking. Maybe it's like, this felt like something really big. It was that, the resistance in Iraq had picked up, both from foreign fighters and local Iraqis. And so we're like, okay, let's see what happens. And so we went in June of '04, and we got deployed to Western Iraq. Al-Assad Air Base was the big air base out there. And so we were near the Euphrates River, and I'll tell you what, the last time we're in Iraq, the year before, we were in the north where it was a little more temperate, and it was in the spring. But going in late June to the Western Iraq desert, it felt like walking out of the back of the plane, the C-130, just getting hit with like a blow dryer on the hottest setting. I'm like, oh shit, like, this is like the first minute and this is miserable. Like, and I'm just like walking, like my mind's starting to catastrophize. Like, what is this gonna be like if we actually have to do something? It was, yeah, a lot of misery.
So what was your mission there? And what did they tell you when you got there you would be doing?
When we got there, it was a blur because I was tired, but we were supposed to just patrol around, be security presence, and they were getting some mortar fire, some indirect fire from off the base outside. People would, shoot 6 or 7 mortars out of the back of a truck and drive away. So we're here to find those guys and get them, and just patrol around the different cities and establish a presence. And so things would calm down, and they could rebuild the country and the infrastructure, you know.
So before you went, again, back to your mentality, were you excited again, or were you getting nervous going for a full deployment there?
I was excited to go back. You know, it was like the hope of like, okay, maybe I can, this really, I was just turned 21 in my second deployment, so I was like, all right, maybe I can go be in a war, like I do some exciting stuff. And so I was excited for that opportunity. And, like the first time I was scared, actually, it was like when we were getting to Iraq and I realized I hadn't packed any sunscreen because I'm fucking pale. And I was like, I'm gonna get burnt the fuck up. Like, this is awful. So that was actually my first fear of being there. It was not from like the enemy. It was from just being a ginger.
Do you remember what your first engagement was, or when you first ran into those guys?
Our first mission out leaving the wire was up the highway, maybe like a few hours in this little city of Anna, or just town. And we had bivouacked, so we set up our trucks. We patrol up, the streets and the highways on these 7-ton trucks. We're just sitting on the back, and then we pull up into a small group of hills and just kind of establish a observation post, listening post. And so we're all asleep at night, and all of a sudden, we get some mortars that are walking in on us. And so we get up, put our shit on, put all our gear on, and kind of assembles, and they take one of the Humvees down and try to chase this guy down. But so mortars got kind of close. I mean, I didn't get any shrapnel or anything, but we're like, okay, this is war. Like, this is real. But still, it was kind of like, okay, is that all that's going to happen? Or are we going to get some indirect fire? And and then they disappear like ghosts and nothing to shoot at. I'll tell you, when it got real is we got sent down to Camp Fallujah, right outside the city of Fallujah, in July. So we've been there for maybe a month or less. And we patrol around the river there. So my best friend there, a guy named Todd Godwin from Zanesville, Ohio, another ginger. So instantly, like, are we best friends now? Yeah. Hung out a lot first deployment. He had transferred over from my platoon into the scout sniper platoon. And so I remember having dinner with him. It's probably July 17th or 18th, right before he went on an op. July 20th, he got hit. His Humvee got hit with an IED. Roadside bomb exploded, killed him almost instantly. So he's my best friend in the whole world. That moment right there when I got the news, because I saw the ID explode from miles away, and I was like, hope that's not one of our guys. Just kind of like I was detached from any kind of connection to me when I saw that happen. Later realizing I'd seen in the distance, that bomb that took his life. And then we got the news, we're really upset, holding back tears, and then it was something we had to compartmentalize and just say, like, okay, well, we're going on an op in 3 hours. So, like, they, without saying it, they were like, put that shit away. We're going out. So, no time to grieve, really, even. So that's when the war became real for me. Like, oh, people get hurt and die. It went from like, this is a fun adventure, like we're gonna go do a war and shoot bullets and like and get excited about it in this very naive way, to like, oh yeah, people you love will be killed and they'll just be gone with no explanation.
It's probably tough, especially at 21 years old, because your emotional fortitude and understanding of how to use those emotions the right way or release them is just not there, right? So.
Yeah, and I couldn't even tell my wife, my girlfriend at the time. I told her, like, I called her. I was able to call from the base at a certain point, but they when someone's killed, they black out communications for a while because they don't want people. One of the is for OPSEC, and the other reason is they want to have someone stateside notify the family of the death so they don't hear it secondhand. And so then eventually I was able to call her and just tell her, like, we won't be going on vacation like we planned with Todd anymore. It's not in the cards. And she understood the meaning of that.
So you already had a vacation plan?
Yeah, nothing set in stone, but like I had met his girlfriend, his fiance. She hadn't met him yet, but we're like, yeah, when we get back, we had the plans, like, we'll get everyone together, just hang out, go on vacation together, and it's like, oh, that's not happening.
What do you remember about him as a person?
So Todd Godwin, probably one of the best Marines I've ever served with or met, encountered with. He was like the picturesque ultimate American. Like grew up, went to church with his family. He probably was an Eagle Scout or a Boy Scout. He was like a black belt in some martial art and karate. Played sports, was service oriented, and then he was good at his job too. Like he was like a physical specimen, So our first deployment, we got sent up early to work in the kitchen, and so like from the very beginning, he mentored me and coached me like how to get in, like we were in like Marine Corps decent shape, but how to get in like elite shape. And so we'd be running on a fucking treadmill on the bottom of the boat while it's like rocking back and forth. He's like, don't pitch out on me. And we're like, all right, I'm not gonna fall off. And teach me how to like do more than 20 pull-ups and like just get just in incredible shape. And just a mentor, like we had no governor on the speed or the amount that he would provide counsel or help to other people. It was just like, yeah, I have these skills, so I will show you. And we were good friends, and we were just friends, So, just an outstanding person, an outstanding Marine, an outstanding person. So it was, a tremendous loss to everybody, not just me. But it was tough. So we had a memorial service for him on Camp Fallujah during that summer. And, we had the memorial service. He was the first one in our battalion to die. And walking back from the base theater or chapel to our tents on the base there, we got mortared. And so, like, I think I was in such just a haze, like I didn't give a fuck about anything. So I just, not out of bravery, but I was just numb to it. I just watching mortars just boom, 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 and then hit the motor pool, and like a few vehicles caught on fire, but right by me. And some people left to, get cover, and I'm just like, I don't fucking care. Like, whatever. I was just numb to it.
Were you coming to grips with your own mortality at that point? Like the potential that you could be killed there?
I started to feel a little bit of, I might not make it back. Like, those questions were pinging in my mind, that I might not make it back. And I think my biggest regrets were that I didn't have more time with my girlfriend. I didn't have more time with my wife to really develop that relationship and spend more time with her. And, I had those moments later on though, but I was coming to grips with not everyone makes it home. Like I think the youth mentality, my mentality growing up is like, oh, I can smoke and I won't get cancer. I can drink and I won't, fuck up my life, and I can go to war and I won't get a scratch on me. I'll be fine. So like, it was just this feeling of invincibility that was gone. So now it was just like, well, ID could take me out at any time. I hadn't experienced a lot of direct fire yet. And so I didn't have that feeling of, or being right on the edge of death yet. And that definitely came though.
So after that experience, obviously extremely traumatic, and I'm sorry for your loss. And what do you remember as being the next the major incident that you had, going from, not just combat related, but just in general? I mean, whatever happened after that?
Yeah, we spent a lot of time in the desert, And we eventually left Camp Fallujah and went back to Al Assad, and we were just kind of like back to doing pointless ops, it felt like, and just chasing these people shooting mortars and disappearing back into the population, and you know, wondering, are we actually going to get any gunfights? You know, like we're kind of prepped for going into Fallujah. We thought when we went down to Camp Fallujah there, we're like, this battle would happen and we'd go into the city and then we get sent away again. And we're like, huh. So I'll tell you one interesting thing that happened was summer of 2004 in August, and we were at some remote place in the western Iraqi desert at the Al Anbar province. And I remember this one night in particular, we saw the most intense meteor shower I've ever seen. And this is like away from any kind of light pollution or anything. We're talking about like going across the entire sky. So, you know, there's some moments of beauty there and some moments of just wonder, like I'm in a war zone, but I'm seeing the most epic night sky I've ever seen. So it was interesting because I couldn't get too attached to how beautiful it was because I had to provide security still. You know, I had a few moments later like that involving like petting animals while I was in combat. So it's kind of such a contrast between like beauty and like, you know, the horror and awful things that can happen in combat. But after that, we got sent back down, and we're told we're prepping for urban combat. They weren't saying it outright that you're going into Fallujah, but we knew.
How were you prepping?
We're practicing doing urban combat stuff, you know, kicking open doors and clearing buildings, and practice that over and over. And eventually they said, all right, we're going to go into the city of Fallujah. They didn't give us too much advance warning because they didn't want us to call home like, hey, we're going to attack in the city. So they wanted to keep it at least a little bit of a surprise, you know. But the energy was building, you know, the whole time. We kind of were hoping and kind of knew that something big was going to happen. We just hoped we were part of it. But yeah, this was, you know, October. We're prepping up for it, and the battle started early November of 2004.
So that the Battle of Fallujah was when you first started to see direct engagements with the enemy?
Correct. Yeah, the first time traded bullets with people. I mean, it's a full pitched battle. You know, they were like, okay, we're going to attack them. They're ready for it. You know, so, you know, I have since learned some of the strategy and the upper echelon stuff that went into planning it. At the time, though, I'm a young corporal on E4, and what I know is like I've got to take care of the guys in my team and my squad, and we're gonna go kick open some doors and shoot people trying to shoot us. So my focus of it was very narrow.
What was it like right leading up to the invasion itself? Like you had was everybody staged for the invasion, you know, ready to go in? You had a ton of guys with you, or how was that?
One thing I remember is it was actually on Halloween. So on Halloween 2004, that night, I'm just, you know, drinking some booze, playing cards, smoking cigs. You know, like my wife and other people back home would send us booze in Listerine bottles, and so just dump out the gold Listerine, insert the Jack Daniels, and like mail it over. Like, wow, you guys really have good dental hygiene. We're like, yes, we do. We care about our teeth very much. So we were playing cards, just playing poker, and we knew we were going in at a certain point, and so those nights up to them were just tense. You know, we'd be playing. People would be betting a lot of money, you know, because they're like, fuck, who knows? Maybe I won't have to pay this. And then it was intense because we'd be looking around and saying like, you know, you could catch people looking at you, and we'd look at other people with that look like who's it going to be? You know, like someone's not coming back. And I remember having that moment and playing cards with a guy named Lonnie Wells, and he was one of our first killed in the city. Yeah, and another good Marine. Didn't get to know him as well, but just, you know, glimpses of like having these very human moments, and like time is slowing down and starting to, the gravity of the situation was causing me to experience more of my senses, you know, and slow down and look at, like, you know, people's facial expressions more, their mannerisms, and how I related to them, and the things we do together. And because we're all just kind of just counting time until the big battle happened.
That's kind of a beautiful thing too, if you think about it, you know. It's stuff that you'd never think about otherwise.
Right, things you take for granted, you know, how someone laughs, or, you know, their posture is like, or, you know, their specific mannerisms to them. So, you know, I'm fortunate I have those memories of people lasting, you know, hanging out with them for what would be our last days together. So yeah, we got ready for it. Some people wrote, you know, death letters. I decided I didn't want to do that. I just, for whatever reason, it felt like bad luck. So.
Did you know the gravity of what was coming, or?
I had no idea how big the battle was going to be. I had no idea that it'd be in international news or anything. We're like, oh, it's just, you know, it's a Marine Corps thing, or an Army, and we're fighting the bad guys. And we knew it was big for us. We had no idea anybody would hear about it. So there was no sense of the gravity of the situation. We knew we were going into a big city where there are a lot of people who have been waiting for a long time to fight us. We're like, we know they're stockpiling ammo and weapons, and we know we're creating bottlenecks and choke points in the city, and we're like, we knew it would be a big battle, but we had no idea how big it was going to be.
And they were dropping leaflets too, right, to tell those guys that you were coming?
They started dropping leaflets, I learned later, to tell the civilians to get out of town, and saying like, we will come in and, you know, search out the insurgents and take them. Please get out of the way, you know, so you didn't get hurt. So then, you know, I wasn't there to see it, but there was a mass exodus of people in this city of, I think it's like 250,000 people. Big city, one of the biggest cities in Iraq, you know, and I don't know, go find somewhere, I guess. I mean, what an experience for those people, right? So there were some people that hung back and guarded their stuff, or said like, I'm not leaving. I want to stay here, you know, with either my family, or like maybe the head of household would stay back and send the family away. So yeah, the city was not fully populated by any means when we got there.
And did you know that, had you heard anything about foreign fighters that were coming to the city?
We heard that the city was becoming a mecca almost for foreign fighters, and we knew we'd be fighting people from all over the Middle East, or the Muslim world, who felt it was their duty to fight the infidels, the invaders. And yeah, so it would be like an all-star crew on their end of like foreign fighters and people. So yeah, we knew it was going to be big. We got into our armored vehicles, the Amtraks, call them, as the amphibious vehicles that go from ship to the beach, or we just drove around Iraq. So we drive into the city, middle of the night, and it's me and my squad in there, and a bunch of vehicles going somewhere in the center of the city. So I'm just watching tracer fire and rockets go overhead. I'm like, this is fucking for real.
So before you get too far into it, I don't mean to interrupt the story, but when did you become a squad leader?
I was a team leader for the second deployment. So I was in a squad leader until after the war.
Okay.
But yeah, so I was in there. A squad of us were in there, my team, and yeah, so we're set to secure a certain compound in the middle of the city to get our foothold in there. So yeah, it was. I just remember I was sitting on the end, so I would be the first one off, and the ramp drops, and I run off. I fucking immediately eat shit. I just trip and fall on my face. I'm like, oh, that was fucked up. And I'm wondering like what that was, and I look back and kind of, it's dark, so I see this dude with vacant eyes, just with his arm blown off. It was just a dead insurgent fighter right there. I just tripped over, like step and a half off. Yeah, so I'm like, okay, we're off to a good start here. Like this is like staring this dead dude in the face. I'm like, all right, this is for real. It's for real, for real. And first couple of days, we patrolled and secured this compound, and just the whole energy of the city when the daylight came, with the mosques where they do the call to prayer and the loudspeakers. We're asking our interpreter what they're saying because it was just angry or really loud Arabic speaking. And he's like, basically the gist is, come here to fight the Americans. It's your duty as a Muslim to do this. Was his paraphrasing of what they were, spewing out of here. So, we'd see dudes bounding from back and forth in alleys, coming closer to us, rockets being shot overhead, direct fire. So I'm like, holy shit, this is a war. Watching air come in and, bomb buildings, artillery fire, hit, buildings across the street from us. It was everything you could ever imagine and dream of urban combat being.
So right after you got off and you tripped over the dead insurgent, how quickly or how soon after that did you actually get into your first firefight?
I didn't start shooting, trading bullets with people until the next day and a half after. So we had one day, I think it was like 10th of November, because I remember Marine Corps birthday. We had my company's first casualty in the city. My former platoon commander, a guy named Lieutenant Dan Malcolm, was shot by a sniper. So this incident bothered me, it doesn't sit right still, but it bothered me for years. I felt a lot of guilt because we had a group of women, coming towards us or moving across the street, and they had white flags up, the surrender, come in peace kind of flag. So I was telling them ta'al means come here, so we could get them behind us, so they wouldn't get caught in any kind of crossfire. Behind them, directly moving them, physically moving them, was a bunch of guys. And so they're using these women with white flags to maneuver around the city. And rules of engagement, I could have shot them, because you use the white flag, you have to surrender and come over. And they were using that to maneuver. So it was well within, my rights to just open up and let my guys open up on them. I made this all like, no, we're not doing this. We're not shooting these people. And the buildings to what they move into, eventually we took fire from one of them, so I'll never know. But the buildings they moved into, that's where they shot and killed our lieutenant. And so I carried that guilt for a lot of years in terms of, like, what was the right thing to do? There is no right answer. I wasn't going to shoot a bunch of women. Was not going to do that. But the result of that action was somebody in command of us, one of our Marines, gets killed. I was like, man, this whole thing is fucked. You do one thing, you're a war criminal, or you have to live with the fact that you shot innocent women, or you don't do that, and now guys on your side are getting killed. So it really spun my head, because my black and white, rigidity in terms of what's right and wrong kind of just changed. It's like there's just decisions you make, and you live with them. So, we had to, again, compartmentalize that. Like, okay, Lieutenant Malcolm's, he's dead. So the next day we took off across phase line Fran. So they renamed the cities, or the streets in the cities, so we don't have to learn the Arabic names for them. So they just had a bunch of, I think it was men's names for the north to south streets, and women's names for the east to west streets. So we crossed Route Fran, and we started moving our way south in the city. And basically from there on, it was like, okay, what we're gonna do is go through these neighborhoods, and every single house, you're gonna kick open the door, clear the house, go onto the roof, and then wait for, provide overwatch so the next squad can clear the next house, and then just kind of leapfrogging like that. And so it wasn't but a few houses in that we started taking fire from the ground.
So you had, it was that like the general consensus? Everybody had like an area where they were going to go house to house and see if there's anybody in those buildings?
Yeah, most of us, so we like every single battalion there was going from north to south in the city, and then just mopping up their areas or encountering all the resistance they'd find, and doing that, at whatever speed, but trying to keep the line.
What's that adrenaline flow like when you the first door that you kick in and clear?
My biggest fear during that whole time, the adrenaline's kicked up. I was like, this is for real. Part of me is thinking, am I trained enough? Do I really know what I'm doing? Like, I don't feel like an expert. Like, I'm just some fucking guy with a rifle. I just feeling really inadequate, but I was like, I'm not gonna let my guys down. That was my biggest fear, is that they would get hurt. Like dying, yes, not a great thing, but I was like, even beyond that, I don't want my guys to get hurt or killed because something dumb I do. So I would make sure that like whatever I'm doing 100%. So anybody who's in there, they got a weapon, they're getting shot. And so it just, the adrenaline kicks in, and every sound, every smell and everything you can see is heightened. It is like the ultimate drug. And so I'm experiencing this and on limited sleep, kicking indoors, and on one of the first rooftops, some guy peels out in the middle of the street and just starts shooting from the hip, a machine gun, walking it up, and I fall backwards because I'm on the roof shooting back, but I fall backwards, and one of my junior Marines is dragging me on the side. He's like, "Hey, Ergo's hit. I think he's dead." And I look up at him and I was like, "What the fuck are you doing, asshole?" And it was just one of these like breaking the tension. We're both laughing hysterically because it's like, "Oh, you're alive?" Like, "Yeah, man. What do you think?" And so I get back up and get back in the fight, and yeah, so watching our snipers drop people, shooting grenades at people, shooting, trading rounds, and then at that point, after that first engagement, it kind of started to blur in terms of, it's like rinse and repeat. Kick open a door, and we're not doing it with ideal numbers at all, because we're clearing these, in the nicer neighborhoods especially, these houses are about 2, 3, sometimes 4 stories. You really want, for these 3-story houses, maybe a full platoon to clear it at least, because there's so many entryways and so many, fields of fire and so many ways you can take fire. We're doing it with a team of 4 guys sometimes a squad of like 8 or 9. It's like not ideal, but it's like, well, it's what we got. Here we go.
Just helps you see how, especially if they're putting murder holes in walls and stuff like that. I know that there's a lot of stories of them finding other ways to shoot at you guys, and it just shows how difficult CQB is in general.
Yeah, kicking open doors and after a while, because we were there in the city for a month, doing this almost daily. Some days, after we got to the bottom of the city, we'd have time to we'd be off, or we'd be QRF, or if something went down, or on Overwatch. But most days we're patrolling and kicking open doors. And so after a certain amount of time of that, we went from this city north to south in 6 days. I learned later that was political. They didn't want to give us more than a week. They were like, they said to whoever was in charge of it, "Hey, have this shit sorted out in a week." So 6 days. Because after the 6th day, I was like 7 or 8 days into this battle. We get to go back to the base for a few hours to take a shower, get a hot meal. And I called my mom up, and so I called my wife, and then I called my mom, and my mom's like, "Oh, yeah, I was seeing it on the news. Like, I'm so glad you're okay." And I just remember saying, like, "Aren't you relieved that it's over?" I'm like, what are you talking about? It's like, "Yeah, no, the news said it's over," because that's what they're telling people on the news. And I'm on the phone, literally watching shit pop off and fucking rockets go, and tracer fire and everything, and bombs going off. Like I didn't know what to tell my mom because I don't want to freak her out. But I'm like, well, there might be a little bit more going on for a little bit. I don't know what I said, but I was just in shock. And that was my first taste of perhaps the news isn't reporting what's really going on. I was like, wait a second. Yeah.
Do you remember the first house that you guys went into that had an insurgent in the house?
I remember November 18th of 2004 we were mopping up different sections, going back because we skipped over some houses. In a city of 250,000, we missed a few. I'm going back to make sure we got everybody. And in one of the houses, one of my Marines runs in, he's like, hey, there's some guys behind here. I'm like, well, did you fucking shoot him? He's like, no. Okay, we need to go get them. So capture or kill, get them either way. And so we hop a fence and we're just going house to house. I got a team, it's me and 3 guys. And I finally see him. This one guy turns around as I'm pulling a grenade out, and he drops out of something with a pistol and takes a few shots at me, and he misses. And I'm like, it's like being caught with my pants down. I'm getting a grenade out, and I've got my weapon chicken wing, so I take a few shots. Fucking idiot, miss him, right? And he goes back, and I'm like, well, we got to keep going. And so we're going house to house, and finally get to the last house, and we cleared most of the house except for one little room. And I tell my point man, well, I don't know, maybe they're in the backyard. He kicks open the door and starts yelling, and they start shooting through the door. We start shooting through the door. We're pinned against the stairs in this house, and so we're shooting at each other, me and these guys, from like maybe 5 feet away. So I got 2 of my Marines behind me on the stairs. I hear one of them fall down, and they say he's hit. So I'm like, fuck, he's dead. And I'm pushing this way. My point man is with me, he's pushing that way. So I'm seeing these rounds. I know they're going by, they're hitting behind us, in between us, not hitting either of us. So I feel one go by my neck. I feel it. And I'm like, at that moment, I'm like, well, this is it. This is fucking game over. Like, I'm shooting back, and I surrendered into the moment. Not to say I surrendered to the fight, but I surrendered to the moment and said, like, if this is how I go down, I'm going down with my guys. So I felt a mixture of fear, some regret that I'd never see my girlfriend again, and also an immense amount of pride that I was like, I'm fucking dying with my boots on. I got my guys here. We're fucking doing this, like, to the end. And I had this experience that took me years and years and years to come to grips with, because it didn't fit into the framework of how I saw the world. And the best I can describe it is that time stopped, and I could feel the different cells in my body. I could see out of my feet. I could feel the hairs growing out of my body. I could feel my cells contracting and expanding. I could feel myself breathing. Like, I wasn't, before then, my consciousness existed in my head, and my body was just, a robot that did what my head said. But now I was my entire body. And then, the best I can describe it, my consciousness expanded out into my friends, my team of guys, into the guys we were trying to kill. It was this complete out-of-body experience, and it expanded into the concrete of the house, and then just went out into the infinite. And it was this timeless, peaceful experience of just almost what felt like the entire universe. And I just was like, oh, everything's gonna be okay. And there was no time. I was there forever. And then kind of went whooshing back into, and I was back into present time, seconds ticking away, real time again.
What do you think triggered that?
I haven't had the courage to look up what that is quite yet. I've heard different things, from it being called an endogenous, like DMT like trip or something, or an acute stress response where your body says like, oh, you're about to die, here's a cool experience. Something that happens under extreme amount of stress. Because I hadn't felt it before then, haven't felt it since.
Do you remember what could you see? Were you still in your head, like your vision? Do you remember, or were you outside of your body entirely?
My consciousness included everything. So I could see different directions, and I wasn't outside of my body. My experience included my body and everybody else's body. It was like it was everything.
Wow. It reminds me a lot of spiritual teaching, when they talk about how everybody's the same in terms of the human conscious experience. It's all one consciousness.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So I almost wonder if what some of the shamanic teachings and stuff are, in terms of people that are so in tune that they can be completely present and be inside their have experience similar to what you're talking about without outside influence or drugs or whatever. Mm-hmm. I almost wonder if that's the same type of experience that those teachings kind of push for, if that makes sense.
It feels like it now, and the interesting thing is, part of me refuses or doesn't feel adequate putting an ineffable experience into a category, but that's the best I can explain it, is that I got to be part of a shared consciousness. And imagine trying to explain that to a 21-year-old Marine, who just smokes, dips, drinks, talks shit, and has a limited capacity for any kind of spirituality. I mean, it didn't fit in my box of Protestant Christianity, evangelical Christianity that I grew up with. There's no room for that. So I just said, deny, suppress with alcohol later. But then also to go into the most intense experience I had, fighting, with people at close range. I go from this beautiful spiritual experience to shooting guys in the face, within seconds. And so that part of it, the shooting guys in the face part, stood out. Luckily, the guy behind me, he just got shot in the helmet. He was fine, thankfully. I took some shrapnel in my neck from it, from one of the guys tossing a grenade out. Eventually, I kicked open the door. We lit these guys up. And
how many were in there?
2. Yeah, 2 were in this one building and 2 were in the next building. But yeah, 2 guys shooting through a metal door at us from a few feet away, not too much farther than you are to me right now. I'm just amazed how
you didn't get shot is insane.
Yeah, for sure. One thing that I was really interested in about this experience too was that, I had this Christian upbringing, and I believed it. I went on these mission trips, and through what I was seeing in the war, it was conflicting with my beliefs growing up, and so I was maybe that's not my path, as this Christian. And I wondered, part of me wondered, one, would I bitch out in combat? Would I get in the fetal position and be a liability? That was the biggest fear, right? So I didn't do that. Also, if I was about to die, would I recant or cry out to God, or say, yeah, actually I do believe in this, please save me, Jesus. And I didn't do that, That's because I had that experience, and I was like, whatever that was things are gonna be okay.
So I remember we talked a little bit about this on the phone, because I like to dive into this concept because I think it's extremely interesting, and I think it's not easy for you to talk about, because obviously it's so many years of trying to put it into words. Yeah. But I remember, and obviously this is nowhere near the same intensity level, but I remember when I had an experience, being shot at from maybe 10, 15 feet away with a handgun. And just remember that right before, the first round, so the guy was trying to shoot me in the head, so he lined up the pistol, while I was in the car. And I remember looking over and seeing down the barrel of the pistol, and it was like time stopped. And I could think of like all these different components of life, It was like I like accepted in that moment that I was gonna die, because, I would say it's a little bit further away than you are right now, but not by much. And it was close enough to where I could literally see, down the barrel of the gun, literally like the expression, and I just remember it was like an acceptance, like, okay, well, I know that this was the end, and it is, there's nothing I could do about it. And then all of a sudden, not being dead. And part of me still to this day, like, wonders if I did die. And there's just a lot of different timelines, because I've heard so many people talk about this, the concept of time being an infinite thing. And there's, say there's a million different timelines where we're doing different things, right? All existing at once. And the reason that, it still kind of messes with me today is because I think about it and I'm like, I know for a fact that I was dead. I knew, when I saw that pistol, the barrel of that gun, I was going to die. But now it's like, I wonder if I died and this is all just, like a dream or a different, it's almost like something said you have more to learn, so you're not ready to go yet. But in reality, I was dead. Does that make sense?
Very similar experience I had in my own head, or trying to sort this out in my consciousness. And it took years afterwards, and like after I got out of the Marine Corps, I would smoke a lot of cannabis, because it was the one thing that would stop me from having panic attacks or feeling paralyzed, or kind of curb things. The one thing I knew how to do. And then I'd go into these deep kind of ethereal, existential kind of conversations in my head. Remember, I watched the movie, I don't know if you've seen the movie Jacob's Ladder, where it's like the tale of these Vietnam vets who are like, at the end they realize they're dead. They've been dead. And they're in some other place, but they don't realize it the whole movie, kind of like The Sixth Sense.
Really?
Yeah, so that fucked me up. I'm like, oh my God, am I dead? Because there was no up or down anymore. After I finally admitted this experience had happened, because it didn't fit in a box, so I would just deny it. But the more I tried to deny it, the bigger it got. And I'm like, all right, let's just start over. And so it felt like I was just floating in space, flipping around, didn't know which way it was up. I'm like, let's just start with the fact that this happened, because I experienced it. I don't know how to make sense of it. And then I could build out my framework for maybe how things work, or how I guess the world worked from there. And yeah, for a lot of years, cannabis was an ally for me. It helped me when I needed it. Of course, I would overshoot the mark quite a bit, but
right. Yeah, I had an opposite. I've always gotten more nervous, like with cannabis, so I stopped using it a few years ago. But I've had a similar crutch with, not crutch, but a similar experience with mushrooms, where I'll do like an intention setting meditation ahead of doing, like eating the mushrooms, knowing that there's all these different things that I'm still trying to work out in my head to make sense of, and asking God or the universe or whatever to protect my energy throughout, and then answer those questions. And usually I'll find that during that experience, some of those things will come to light, whether it's through a sign or through some kind of messaging. And it could just be my head, where I just think that that's what that is, but it always feels like I get some kind of response with it, right? And I think that that's relatively similar with what you're saying with cannabis, where it helps you at least try to think through things a little better, right?
Yeah, it would let me access these memories, especially depending on the strain I was smoking, but it would let me access these memories and observe them from the outside. Because every time I try to access that memory, it would be, guys behind me getting shot, I'm about to die, kick open a door, double tap a dude, brains go out of the back of his head. I mean, it was like, and then the other scene is like when I walked in that room too, I mean, a couple times I had to enter. One, they were still shooting, so I threw a grenade, and they threw a grenade back out. We're trading grenades, and I go back in, and one of the guy's legs is like flopping around and it's stuck to the ceiling. No idea how this is possible. And if someone told me this, like they experienced that, I'd be like, okay, you're probably lying. But I'm watching this leg like twitch, plaster to the ceiling, but I don't have time to really take that in other than be like, oh, that's fucked up. And then see this guy in front of me who's still about to shoot me, so I shoot him. And so, like, yeah, this memory, when I want to access like what the spiritual experience I had, that would supersede it. And so when I was using cannabis after, I was able to kind of parse that apart and look at what I wanted to look at without overwhelming anxiety where I shut down.
There's a concept that I've studied a lot lately about how the religious experience is a human construct for societal norms and keeping people into, specific sets of thinking or whatever. And if that were the case, there's people that believe that Satan or evil is what actually gives us this experience in education and the way that we think, and how we're trained to think throughout our lives. And stuff like this, like, kind of makes me wonder if part of why we don't have more experiences like that, or that we don't normalize those experiences, is because the society is designed to keep that from happening, to keep you not fully engaged in your full potential as a human being, right? Which is where a lot of the, like everything from food additives to substance to, shit that they put in the air and everything else, like, is all designed to stop you from being totally present in your consciousness, to be able to, because there's writings and stuff from, centuries ago of people that were able to communicate without speaking and all this other shit. And it's like, you never know. We could have a lot of those abilities and just not know it.
There's a lot of mystical things, and that's why I gravitated afterwards to direct experience. And I started thinking, okay, this is what I've been told about how things work. How am I experiencing how it works? Or I'm told this is right, but it doesn't feel right. And listening to that inner experience more, like you're saying.
So how important do you think it is for somebody to follow their intuition based on, instead of what they're taught?
I think that much like authors have to read and write and learn the rules of grammar before they can expand. Like one writer I really like, Cormac McCarthy, a Western writer, uses no punctuation. And it's really strange. You get into it, but in order to get there, or be like, jazz musicians who can improvise and play and ad lib, and you have to learn the structure first. So you got to start with structure. And what I learned too, reading a book about a chess player named Josh Waitzkin, I think, Learning to Learn, he talked about you got to learn the form to leave the form. And so you learn he learned the rules of chess and all the strategies so that he could eventually leave them and follow his intuition. But he had to start with the structure. Yeah, and it's interesting because I've experienced things like noting that, or experiencing sometimes the greatest fears that we have are the unknown. And so it takes so much to have direct experience and not put it in boxes and constructs. And it's so interesting that now, we can have this conversation now. At the time, I had no vocabulary for this. It was just, holy shit, like it was, I could see what was happening or relive, a memory of a memory, but I had no vocabulary for that, or for what PTSD was, or for having a flashback, or for, having a panic attack. It was just like, oh, I don't like this. This is awful, and I didn't understand it. So it's taken, 20 years to even find the vocabulary to start to experience, or start to talk about an experience.
Has it helped you learning to talk about it, learning to talk about the experience in general?
It's helped immensely learn how to talk about it. I think before I was experiencing what we call in the psych world cognitive dissonance. You experience one thing but are told something different. So you have these two competing versions of reality. Like, it's like almost being gaslit. And you're like, like when I'm watching my kids when they're younger, like color on the wall. I'm like, stop coloring on the wall. I'm not doing that. I'm literally watching you doing that. But having that at large, right? And I was scared to say anything at the time because, like, I'm with, guys age appropriate. We're talking about Maxim magazine and, would you rather bang Jenny McCarthy or Jennifer Aniston or like, Pamela, like, we're like, these are the levels of conversations we're having, and it's not like, hey guys, like when you're in a firefight and like you travel to another, no.
It's interesting because a lot of the DMT experience that people talk about when they smoke DMT is releasing the same chemical in your brain that releases when you die, and it sounds like a very similar experience, like the one that you're having, which is really interesting.
What is the gift? One of the best gifts that it's given me is being able to not be as rigid to what I think I know and being open to actually experiencing it. And I didn't even know that was a concept before. Like I am experiencing how rigid I can be because of the fear of the unknown. Unknown is so great that I would decide to just live with cognitive dissonance rather than have the freedom of pure experience.
That's incredible. So it almost ended up being a good thing for you.
Yeah.
In a way.
Exactly.
In a fucked up way.
Exactly. And I've told people before, like, I would not trade my experience for anything. However, I say that not wishing, the death of my friends or the destruction of the city, of the Iraqi people, all this fucked up things for me to have this experience of, spirituality or enlightenment or whatever terms we're going to apply to what I experienced. I don't want the bad stuff to happen, but I wouldn't trade it for anything to have what I have now.
If you put what you just said into perspective for somebody else that is living with PTSD or is going through a difficult time where they're struggling, do you feel like, in a way, no matter what the experience is or how negatively we look at it, there's always something that you could be learning from it?
I think there's always something we can learn from an experience, and having that as a concept even changed my life. I spent a lot of years afterwards drinking myself to death and feeling like a victim and having self-pity. And I was like, well, this is my life now. Government sent me to this war that shouldn't have happened. My friends died, and woe is me, right? And yes, these things subjectively, maybe objectively, were wrong or fucked up. However, I was negating all personal responsibility or choice or my part in the situation or opportunity for things I could do. I was just throwing that away, flushing it down the toilet. And it wasn't until I stopped drinking and smoking that I could have those experiences of the agency of self and what I could accomplish. Because I was out of control, man. Like because I didn't want to admit this spiritual experience I had was real, and I didn't want to relive any combat stuff. So I was like drinking, riding my motorcycle, blacked out, like just out of control. And eventually my wife, was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, either you got to stop or I'm done. She's like, I love you. I know who you are inside of this, but I can't go down this road with you destroying yourself like this. So shit, she's like, you have to make this choice. And then she left and, moved back in with her parents for a while. And in my mind, I hesitated because I was like, she's the person that I love the most in this world. And I don't know how to live without, blunting myself with these chemicals. I was like, fuck. So I went cold turkey. I quit booze. I quit drugs. And because I was like, I got to give this a shot at least.
Isn't it interesting to think about the grip that kind of shit gets on you, where you're actually hesitant to take the action versus like losing the person that you care about the most?
I was ashamed to even admit it, right? I felt it, but to even say it out loud is fucked up, right? But now I understand just the gravity of the grip that addiction can have. And I didn't know anything else I could do, and I was scared to try something new. So I was like, I know drinking. Drinking will blunt the effect of things. So I'll just do this. I'll just keep doing this, even though the consequences are stacking up more than the enjoyment or the benefits. I mean, for me, that was the insanity of addiction for me.
So how did you actually quit and not go back to it?
I dove deep into spirituality. I said, okay, let me just notice the thoughts I'm having. And I worked out a lot. I was like, I have all this energy, so of things coming in and things that are stagnant and stuck with me in me, I got to do something, or I'm probably just gonna fucking kill myself. So, luckily, one of my good friends from growing up, Chris, he gave me. My birthday was, I stopped July 11th, 2012. For my next birthday, I've been doing CrossFit and trying to work out and stuff. He gave me a registration to a half marathon as a birthday present. I was like, this is fucking dumb. This is the shittiest present I've ever gotten, because I'm gonna have to work out to do something I don't want to do. I'm like, okay. But then I was like, I didn't want to wimp out either. So luckily, it was able to harness my ego. And I was like, I'm not going to bitch out. And so I started running and getting in shape. And I remember this one experience I had. I was going around the corner and from this church in my neighborhood. And I had this one experience of I just noticed that I felt okay in my own body, which then brought on the realization that I had not felt okay in my own body in a long time, like years. And it was just this powerful realization of I don't need to be anywhere else. I can be right here running. And I don't need the aid of other chemicals to blunt the effect of the nature of reality or alter it in any way. I can be in reality right now. And it was just a profound feeling. And I took that and it was, combined with a runner's high. And I started and I ran the race with him. I loved it. I was like, well, yeah, maybe there's something to this. And that started my journey of, endurance sports and everything that became.
So if somebody was watching this that was struggling with the PTSD, addiction, all the things that you were struggling with, what would you say to them to help them out?
What I'd say to anybody that's struggling with anything that they can't handle, whether it's memories, trauma, addiction, all these things make it harder to be here right now. What's helped me is movement. And the way it makes sense to me is this. When I was feeling really depressed and I felt like I didn't want to do anything, physically moving forward helped me actually move forward in life. And when I'm feeling overwhelmed, the same amount, movement. Because if I have energy bursting out of me and it has nowhere to go, it's going to come out in destructive ways. And so if I'm moving and doing something that's good for me and will benefit my body, I can be here in this moment with the distraction of my feet hitting the ground or on the pedals or swimming or lifting weights or walking up a mountain or whatever it be. I can be here right now and I can feel okay. And our bodies give us the response of, this is okay to be here right now. Because trauma essentially can take us a couple of different ways. It can take us back into the past. So trauma can take us back into the past, or it can take us into the future, what we think it's going to be like. So this is fucked up, weird time travel going back and forth. And you don't know what's happening, but it's all bad. It never takes you to the good places. It's like, here's the worst things that you've been through and you relive them, or here's something that how it's going to be a catastrophe in the future. But then if I can come back to right here, right now, we're sitting and talking. Life is good. We can breathe air. We've got access to food and water. It's safe. There's no gunfire. No one's shooting at us. If those things were to happen, we'd handle it. We'd take care of it. Right? Right now is perfect. But I couldn't find that. I couldn't access that until I had the movement.
So back to that room, what do you remember for the rest of the time that you were in Fallujah? What happened next?
Well, I remember kicking open a door, trying to get a foothold in this room. People are shooting back at me still. A grenade gets thrown out, and so I push my guys out of the room, and we get out of there, right? I turn around, and it goes off, and I'm just kind of waiting, stunned, like, still fucking here, I guess, you know? I felt a little sting into my neck, but, you know, I had shit to take care of there, so it wasn't, you know, the most urgent thing in my mind. And I go back, I toss a grenade in, let it go off in this room, and then eventually kick open the door, you know, after the smoke clears, because, you know, you throw grenades in a house, it gets really smoky and dark really quick. And so we're in this unlit house with no power, and so I had to wait for the smoke to clear so I could actually see what was going on. I kick open this door, I see this one guy laying in the corner, he's done. I notice this leg kicking around on the ceiling, okay. And then I see this guy in front of me clutched onto 2 grenades, just going, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. And so I shoot him a bunch of times in the chest until he falls over, you know, like most of my magazine, whatever is left. And then, you know, I think I'm not sure if he's got grenades. He's got grenades, he drops them, they're duds, but I'm not around to find out. I want to get out of the way. We wait for a certain amount of time and I go back in, you know, and I see this guy who had shot a bunch of the times. He's still moving. It looks like he's trying to get up, probably, you know, death rattles. But I hear the sound coming out of his mouth of gurgling, and he's still moving, so I double tap him to the head. His brain literally flies out of the back of his skull and hits the back wall. And the room is just, there's like just blood everywhere. But the feeling in the moment, I mean, this is a horrific scene, is that of complete elation, because I just survived what I had no business surviving. All my guys were okay too. So check both boxes. I took care of my guys and I'm still alive. And it's such a high. People came in later when we get on the comms and told them it's okay. You know, everybody's taken care of. To come in, and I saw this picture of me afterwards, and I got this just intense, just crazy look in my face, like I just, you know, scored the winning touchdown in a game or something. And it's just, I'm completely angry and elated at the same time. This bloodlust in my face. It's actually fucked up because I was at a tailgate for an Oakland A's game, like years later. And this picture had apparently made its way through the internet, I guess. Because I met a guy, another Marine, he's like, oh, I know you. And I'm there with my college friends. I'm in UC Berkeley, you know, so like everything you imagine about people at UC Berkeley, it's like that. And my civilian friends I grew up with, just mind my own damn business at a tailgate before a baseball game. And a Marine I knew I went to school with introduced me to this other Marine, and he said, oh, I know you. I seen a picture of you. You were in this house in Iraq, and he described the scene, and I see my fucking friends just be like, oh shit, perhaps he did have a pretty legit war experience. Because like I wasn't coming back and telling my friends like, oh yeah, I just wasted this dude, or I just, you know, like I almost got shot in the face and any of that. And then they got to hear it from this other source, like, yeah man, that was the most grisly picture I've ever seen, like in Iraq. So I'm like, in my head, I'm like, fucking thanks for bringing that up, you know. Like so I'm like turning hot dogs on the grill. So I was mostly quiet about my experience for a while.
Was there anything else that stuck out after that house?
A couple things stuck out, but one that really matters. One that a week before, on top of a roof, I was sitting next to a friend, just smoking some cigs, and I finished my first one, and he's like, hey, you want another one? I'm like, no, I'm good. So I got up to pull security, looking over this wall. And the next thing I remember is hearing a whoosh. And then I was waking up. What had happened was an RPG was shot through, we're on top of a roof, through a wall, through the roof wall, and then landed right about where I was sitting. And my friend that was still sitting there had a bunch of fucking shrapnel in his arm. You know, I put the pieces together after the fact. But it was so similar. I remember seeing the movie Saving Private Ryan after that. And it was so similar to, like, I couldn't hear, I had tunnel vision, and all of a sudden, you know, my vision expanded to what was going on. I could hear again. And I got up. I had no idea, like, how I got there. I was just like, oh, now I'm waking up. And I could barely hear, and my squad leader, one of our squad leaders, was gripping his leg because he'd been hit by a brick from it. So I had to drag this dude off the roof. And it was interesting just to, like, in the moment, I'm just getting up and doing what I need to do. And then through years of talking about it with the other guys, I put together what had actually happened. And there's a lot of things like that I had forgotten that people told me about that happened. So in the back of my head, there's all these things that happened in Fallujah in that month that I don't remember, that I've either blocked out, or I just don't remember, or I've had concussions, so it's gone, or for whatever reason, it's just inaccessible to me, or they blur together. But I think that one of the scariest parts about that moment was that some of the guys, you know, there's certain guys that we will be stationed with or serve with that are invincible. Like the guy who got hit was one of our squad leaders, Billy Leo from the Bronx. This motherfucker, dude. He's like the ultimate, like, biggest Irishman I've ever seen. You know, 6 foot something, fucking big. He's born breeched backwards, so his nose is like that, and so thick Bronx accent. So he's like, this guy's fucking invincible. And that was the first time I saw fear in his eyes when that happened, when I was dragging him off the roof. He ended up being fine, which is great. But there's so many, like, and I bring this up in this anachronistic way just to show, it's like the memories of combat aren't always from start to finish. It's like a mosaic. It's like I have blips that appear here and there, and I try to put all the pieces together to see actually what happened. But there's just shards of memories. Like traumatic memories are just shards. They're not necessarily chronological order. So a lot of that happened. And one of the most surreal things that I think that happened in terms of like what I was talking about earlier, beauty and fear mixed in the same, as I was sitting guarding the entrance to, we'd occupied this house for the majority of the month that we operated out of. It became our little base. And I'm sitting there and I see this cat, and I grew up loving cats. And this cat's like meowing. And so I open up this MRE of beefsteak and I'm like feeding it to it, and it's sitting on my lap and I'm like petting this cat. And I mean, I've had no positive interaction with like people or animals, at least, you know? And so I'm like, I'm petting this cat and just loving it, and this cat's just purring. It's like the best day of its life because I'm feeding it all this food because its owners are gone, right? And at the same time, I've got a grenade in my 203 loaded and my rifle, you know, condition 1 round of the chamber pointed at the door just in case someone walks in. So I'm like, I've pet cats before and I've shot people before, but I've never done the same thing at the same time. So I had little moments like that where, you know, I didn't know what to think of them because it was so mixed. You know, the good and ugly happened at the same time. And then it's interesting that, like, I have no remorse about any of the people I shot at all. None. But the biggest guilt I carried around shooting anything was a dog that jumped out of a closet. And before I knew it, I saw a movement coming at me. I shot this poor thing, and it was coming to me for help. And I just had to had a killer right there. So all these little blips would show up of the whole month. And the thing that was tough about it was that, there's larger and smaller battles within the battle that we'd fight and go support other people, and I could talk for hours and hours about it. But when it comes down to it, it felt like every few days, we'd hear about someone was lost and someone was gone, someone else was gone. And I had this moment where when we finally got out of the city, and this is December of 2004, we finished our part. We'd been there for over a month, and we got relieved and pulled out because we had taken so many casualties that we were somewhat combat ineffective. So we had that new units come in and replace us. I went to find my friend Robbie, who lives in Noblesville, Indiana, and find our other friend Dave. And I was like, hey, where's Dave, man? We all made it. Like, what's he up to? He's like, oh, man, he got shot in the face. He's dead. He's gone. And I remember that being such a kick in the gut afterwards, because up to that point, I knew most of the people who had been shot and killed. But to get back and think, like, finally, we made it out of here, and realize it just, I didn't even know the extent to which we had taken losses, was pretty heartbreaking. So after that, I kind of just felt dead inside for a long time, because I didn't want to experience more loss or like get attached to anybody else. So that was the start of like the very dark period of using and abusing drugs.
What was the rest of your deployment like?
We sat around and patrolled out of the Abu Ghraib prison, and so I literally lived in a prison cell. Like it was open, but in this like, not in the main jail, but in one of the smaller buildings. And we patrolled, didn't really get shot at. We had kids throw rocks at us. That was fucked up, but it was mostly quiet. We spent Christmas there and New Year's. I remember, New Year's getting drunk, and just the sheer immensity of like the loss we had taken in lives of people I cared about and loved just got to me, that I sat in my room for a little while. I had my own room broke off from the rest of our squad. I sat with my M16 in my mouth. I'm like, let's just do it. Let's just get it over with. And for whatever reason, I didn't pull the trigger. So I just like, it hadn't hit me, the gravity of it yet. Of like, all these guys are dead. Like, I was just living for the next moment of like what's going on. But when it finally slowed down, the time to think was dangerous for me. But then, we eventually went back to the air base, Al Assad, sent our gear back, got ready and flew back home. And the high of coming back home was pretty intense. Just like yes, putting aside, compartmentalizing a lot of fucked up things that happened. We had no idea just the international attention we'd gotten until I called, like during the middle of the battle, I had actually called my wife and just dated at the time and said, hey, how's it going? She's like, are you okay? I'm like, yeah. She's like, I'm watching you guys on the news right now. And I was like, oh, like I didn't know that there was any kind of, she would know about what we're doing. I was trying to like shelter her, like, hey, the code word, if something was not, if we're gonna get into some gunfights or battle or whatever, I would say like, I probably won't be able to talk for a couple weeks. That was kind of code word for like, yeah, it's about to get real. But I didn't know until she told me. And she told me later too, that she would read the newspaper and they'd list out the people who had died each day in this battle, and she'd just scan the names to see if I was on there. But so when I finally got back to see her, she came out, flew out with my parents to North Carolina. I mean, it was the best feeling, the best feeling. And it was only slightly soured, it was tainted by the fact that I couldn't introduce her to some of my best friends because they were dead. But in the moment, the high of getting back overrode that. You know, probably a couple weeks after that faded away, and again, the immensity of the battle started to kind of like seep in of what we had experienced. So I'd have these periods of like happiness and these periods of like doom and gloom. But the more time I had to think, I couldn't get out of my head. I couldn't make sense of it all at all. It was just noise and chaos that had no context. And so, yeah, it was, I eventually, you know, got out of the Marine Corps, you know, about 6 months later, drove back here to California, and it was kind of like a now what? I mean, where do you go? Like, where could I go in my head, or nothing I felt could compare to the high of being in combat or making sense of any of that stuff. So I didn't know what the point of going on living was, other than I loved my wife and wanted to spend time with her. So very confusing period of life.
Was that the time that you had the rifle barrel in your mouth? What was going through your head at that point? Was it just general depression, or was it like something specific that was?
At that point, when I had that M16 in my mouth, there was enough time and space of me being alone and chemically altered to a point where I could think a little bit about what I had just seen. Because before I just block it out, just almost like I was putting my fingers in my ears and just focus on whatever I was doing. But I couldn't escape the noise at that point because everything was quiet around me, and I had time to think. And I just kept reliving, you know, hearing the radio chatter of people dying that I cared about, or the news of people dying, or, you know, bodies of people I had shot, or just, it was so much of like, what's the point? If this is what my life is going to be like, I don't want this.
It was like so many traumatic things that you had to suppress coming up all at once, kind of.
Yeah, and I didn't even have the vocabulary to describe them. It was just a fire hose of fucked up things coming at me. And grief and horror. I'm like, maybe my best move is to exit this life and get it over with.
So after you came home, was that the only time that you got that close to taking your life?
I'd do it passively. I'd ride my motorcycle around blacked out and just kind of like, what happens, happens. I didn't have any specific attempts of suicide, but I was tempting fate. I'm like, let's see what happens. Let's roll the dice as many times as possible, and hoping I would die, but not having either the courage or the direct intent to do it myself. So it was just kind of floating adrift.
And it's interesting because it's almost an ego thing when it comes down
Yeah.
to it. It's like you're so, because that's, you know, my grandfather was in Korea, he shot himself, and I always think about how it's like the most selfish thing that somebody could do, right? And you don't think about that in the moment because you're so caught up in like feeling bad about everything, you know, about your scenario or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. But it really fucks a lot of people up when that.
Yeah, and the thing that held me back was knowing the devastation I'd caused people. And, you know, I've had friends since take their own lives, and just really trying to do a deep dive and to understand, like, it's sometimes a perfect storm of overwhelming experience that they can't even access the thought of what it's going to do to other people. And so it's such a scary thing. And, you know, I was so close to, I mean, I tempted fate a lot of times getting back, just with how reckless I was. That, you know, I had a few years after my initial point of sobriety in 2012 that I would kind of wake up and like, oh my God, how did I survive? And have these waves of like panic or like guilt for what I'd done, or how I just walk that line between life and death without caring about what it would do to other people. That lasted, those shock waves would happen for years.
So what do you do now that you've gotten past a lot of that?
Mm-hmm.
What lights you up now and keeps you engaged and present?
A couple things. I went for the one extreme of drug and alcohol use up until 2012, and I got involved in endurance sports and started doing Ironman triathlons. And I didn't know why at first. I'm like, I just needed to get the energy out. And saw this beautiful segment of this woman who was honoring her husband, a woman named Lisa Hallett, who would honor her husband John, who was killed in combat, by running these triathlons. And I was like, that's exactly what I want to do. So I got these triathlon jerseys, and I put every single name of the guys who died in combat with us and who had died since, either from suicide or medical complications or subsequent deployments. So I had a list of 29 guys on my shirt, and I'd run for, and I'm like, I can process. I started realizing I can process whatever shit I'm going through by doing this, and I can keep their memories alive, and I'd call up their families, the different people, and form relationships with them, and say, hey, you know what? Your brother Travis is still in my thoughts, and his memory's still alive. And I realized how good that made people feel, which made me feel really good. And it felt like this cycle of like, instead of a destructive cycle, it felt like a virtuous cycle, a perpetual energy. And I'm like, I can feel good, they can feel good. I can bring some kind of meaning to all the shit I went through. And if I can do that in a healthy way, and have fun doing it, So I did that for a while, and then I started a initiative within Ironman where it started with me, and then we branched it out to other people, where we'd have a veteran carry a flag in honor of a Gold Star family and whoever they lost. And on the flag, we'd have a streamer with the fallen's name on it and their rank. And it started out in 2018. I ran a Ironman in Santa Rosa here, and found a local Gold Star family. They lost their son, Josh Kynock, Army veteran who was killed in Iraq, and carried the flag for him. So Ironman consists of, it's a 2.4 mile swim, and then you do a 112 mile bike ride, and then you run a marathon. And so I would run the marathon with the flag, and then people would ask, like, what are you doing? Like, what is this about? And I get to tell them stories about either people I had met, or people I served with, or these people where you're honoring, and keep their memory alive. And I was like, this feels really good. And then they'd know, then that person wasn't dead, because their memory was still alive. They moved on with us. And at the end, I present the flag to their family, and they felt great. That became my next mission, because what I realized really fucked up is that a lot of times when people lose somebody in combat, if lose a family member, the community will come together and support them for like the funeral, right? And then after that, the communities and people's discomfort with death and not knowing what to say supersedes any kind of relationship they had with them usually. And so they'll basically shun that family. So now this family has lost their son or daughter, or their husband or wife, and then they lost their community a lot of times. So I was like, I don't want that to happen. I don't want that to happen at all. And so I've been part of something like that for the last 6, almost 7 years now, where we do this at different races. And
one of the something that I've actually heard several times is that some guys that served with somebody that they cared about that passed, they won't go direct to the family till years later because they feel either guilty or they feel like they wouldn't want to hear from them. So what would you say to them as far as why it's important to do so?
Yeah, and I felt that for years. I felt so guilty that I had survived and their son hadn't. And I had this big fear that they would see me and get upset that I was here and their son wasn't. And I thought they would hate me, and that they did hate me or resent me. And I learned nothing could be further from that truth. Every single Gold Star family I've connected with has just craved the stories about their son or daughter. And they're like, tell me more. So I named my son Liam. His middle name is Todd, after my best friend Todd Godwin. And in 21, I talked with their family and asked, hey, can I run this race in honor of Todd and of your son? And they said, yeah. And so we went out and I got to meet him again out in Ohio where they live, and did this Ironman out there and introduced my son, who's named after him. And they were just so happy. They're just like, yeah, they miss their son, but they're so happy to know like his namesake is alive and his memory is alive, and they wanted to hear from me. They wanted me to do well. And I didn't know that until, I had a different Gold Star mom just tell me one time at a Memorial Day event. She just pulled me aside. She said, I'm so happy you made it back. I'm so happy you're alive and you're going to do great things. I had not had that message at all. I made my head spin. Yeah, it made me cry and everything. And I was like, the first time I really felt welcomed back by the community. And so I'd tell that to anyone who doesn't want to contact their family, that's maybe one of the best things we can do, is contact their families and be in touch with them. Because they're just in the dark sometimes, completely disconnected.
So how does somebody get involved in your organization with Gold Star families? Or do you have an option for that?
Yeah, I do, yeah. So I have a website called goldstarinitiative.org, and we are designing races or participating in races, starting in California, and we'll branch outwards as we go. So people can either race themselves, if they're a combat vet, or refer a family, or donate, or be part of it. And I think that just like what we're doing right here, the gift you've given me and given everyone who sees this, is just being able to talk and tell the story. What I do for a living is I'm a counselor for veterans. I work for the VA vet centers, and I listen to veterans tell their stories, and just the healing power of being able to talk about something, even if you've experienced to take what's in your head and put that into words and share that with other people, or at least one other person, is sometimes the best gift you can give someone.
Anything else you want to talk about before we wrap this up? You got a podcast.
Yeah, I'm really big into the intersection of mental health and physical health, and how they're very much aligned and part of the same thing. And so I do a podcast with my black friend. We call it Ginger and Chocolate, and you probably guess which one I am. I met her through one of the races I did. She's also a triathlete, and so it's so interesting that we just find so many people to talk to who are doing positive things out in the world like you're doing, and share that with the world. So so we talk about that to try to be, some good, exciting news going on, amongst all the bad news out there.
Yeah, that's for sure. one of the guys that we recently interviewed, Chris Randhell, has a organization called Veteran Militia. And basically it's a group of vets that you can go to and participate in any kind of sporting event around the country, and they'll connect you with other guys that are in your area in case you don't have friends and stuff like that around there. So I'd like to see if there's ways that we could connect you guys, and maybe, we can branch out your Gold Star initiative, because I think that that'd be a really special. And I think it's incredible to hear that you're a counselor for the VA, because I've heard several people now that talk about how difficult it is to talk to VA counselors, because they're usually young and fresh out of college and don't know how to relate to them. So if somebody wanted to get in touch with you, do you have an option to do that if they need help from you?
Yeah. If anyone wants to reach out, I mean, I'll give you my card, and my email address is michael.ergo@va.gov, and I've done a lot of work, not just with the veterans I speak to and talk to at my own vet center, but connecting people with their local vet centers. One of the interesting things, without going too deep into it, is that the vet centers were founded by Vietnam vets who weren't getting as much help as they wanted from the main VA, because it's difficult to access sometimes. And just the experience of talking in a regular room that's not part of a hospital, can feel like a safe place for people to share what they've gone through. It's like I had no idea I could share that experience. In fact, there's a Vietnam vet who brought me to a vet center myself once, and he's like, "You're gonna go here and talk to somebody because you look as fucked up as I did when I got back from Vietnam." I said, "Okay." And I thought counseling was stupid, and I thought it was fucking lame, and it wouldn't work. And I'm sitting in this room talking with this counselor. I'm like, I don't feel like killing myself anymore. I actually feel some like hope to go forward and live life now. So I was like, man. And then she asked me, she's like, "You ever thought about doing this kind of work?" And I was like, yeah, this is it. Like, in the same way, like I shop for presents for people. I don't know what I'm looking for exactly, but I know when I find it. I know like what it is, I feel it. So that's what it is for me.
That's great. That's a great message. Is there anything that you wanted to say before we disconnect on this end?
I think I will always be grateful for the opportunity I got to serve the country and to meet the guys I met serving and be part of that, because I wouldn't trade that experience for anything. Even knowing what I know now and what I've lost and what I've experienced and the hardships I faced, I would not trade that for anything.
We appreciate you being here and doing this with us. I know it's a tough thing to go through, but I think it's necessary. I think it helps a lot of people to see stuff like this, and to hear that it's possible to share, your experiences and have it take that weight off of you.
Yeah.
So we really appreciate you being here.
Happy to, man. You guys did 90% of the work coming out here.
Yeah.